Managing the mental load with undiagnosed ADHD just led me to burnout. As much as I spent a lot of time trying to tell myself that I wasn't an alcoholic, the reality is the amount of time and energy I put into knowing when my next drink was, how long I could drink for, when I had to be back, all of that mental gymnastics you do. Yeah. It went beyond that to a point where I'd wake up in the morning and I say I never drank in the morning. I have a friend who's like, well, were you still drinking at 7 a.m. after doing a load of Coke? And I was like, yeah. She goes, that counts as drinking in the morning. Yeah. And I was like, I never went to sleep and then woke up. And
right, okay.
But essentially, I didn't wake up and have a drink, didn't put vodka on my cornflakes. I didn't hide booze around the house. I never lost my license. I didn't lose my kids. I didn't lose a job. I wasn't arrested, didn't end up in hospital. All of those things back in the day would have had me thinking, I'm not an alcoholic. Very much binge drinking, but I was doing it because I was really unhappy and I wanted to change the way I was feeling. Once I started, I never knew where I was going to end up, what was going to happen, or who I was going to be with.
Yeah.
And it was that simple. It was like Russian roulette. It doesn't really matter what we call it, but we need to be honest about what it is. Alcohol use disorder, doesn't matter what, you're still the same. Part of my acceptance and part of my recovery is supported. So the foundation of it is that I am an alcoholic. If there was any wriggle room or any PR on that, I know my brain, I'd figure out a way to get around it.
100%. Cool.
I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
End of. And I am very grateful. I remember somebody said to me the other day, if you could cure your alcoholism, if you could go back in time and you never had it, would you? And I was like, absolutely not. I cannot ever imagine giving up what I've learned in sobriety.
Welcome to School of Rock Bottom with Oliver Mason. I'm an actor, a voiceover artist and recovery coach who's been sober 10 years. And I know firsthand that rock bottom can be the greatest teacher and the springboard for a beautiful life. And as you know, I interview fellow creatives and all inspiring people that have hit rock bottom, survived and thrived. This is a podcast of hope and how to get out of the darkness into the light. And that's why I'm so excited today, because I've got the cool, charismatic and creative Kat Sims in the studio.
I love the alliteration.
Do you like
Thanks
that?
for having me.
You're so welcome.
I'm very excited. That's so exciting.
I know, I tried to sort of,
you really did. You did warn me at first. You were like, it's going to be really pacey at first. And I was like, yeah, but I'm almost so engrossed. I forgot I was here to talk.
That's absolutely brilliant. Now, look, quick shout out to the sponsors of today's episode, Gavin Sisters. Head to the show notes now for 10% off their funky coffee and wellness retreats. Right, Kat Sims. If you don't know who Kat is, shame on you. You will do now. So here's a quick bio and then we're going to dive straight in.
Perfect.
So Kat Sims is a content creator, podcaster and author who is still trying to figure out the whole adulting thing. She's made a living out of documenting her failures and successes as a 40-year-old woman, a mother and a wife across various social media platforms. Her mission in life is to make as many women as possible feel seen and to make them realize that they are never, ever the only one. She's honest, wonderfully self-deprecating and willing to say all the things the rest of us hide away, and in doing so, managed to make us all feel a little bit better about our perfectly messy lives. Wow, love that. Kat is author of the new book, literally brand new book.
Brand new.
The Mental Load Diaries, and is nearly 4 years sober.
That's me.
What an intro.
I feel like I need to update that a bit because, full disclosure, I turned 44 on Sunday.
That's right, we'll keep it at 40.
Well, I try.
We'll
see. Yeah.
40s, early 40s. Early 40s.
I think I qualify for mid-40s. That's what my husband said. He said, you're mid-40s now.
No, not till you're 45.
Okay, great.
I think you're
early 40s. I'm going with that then.
I've warned you how I start the episode, and I do every podcast episode. I'm going to ask you to share one of, I'm guessing, many rock bottom moments, because I know I had many. But from there, we're going to get into the joy, the light, the hope, the recovery.
Great. So you're right. And I was thinking about the rock bottoms, and there's a number of them, but I think the one that I share the least actually, but is really important, is the one that happened to me. Actually, I was in early 30s, and I think I only had one kid at the time. He was maybe about 18 months or 2, and I'd been out at a work thing, and I was help running a charity, and there was a board meeting essentially. And we did this board meeting, and then it was like, should we do lunch? And they're all in the creative industries, all in the music industries. And before I knew it, turned into a big drinking, drugging thing. And it just went really horribly wrong. And I remember coming to, and it was a blackout situation. And I remember coming to in one of the board members' hotel rooms in a very, very uncomfortable position. He was assaulting me. And if you've never had a blackout, you don't really understand how discombobulating it can be when you finally come back. Because I think some people assume that a blackout is where you're sort of passed out.
Yeah.
It's not the case. Like, as far as I can be in blackout, but look like I'm functioning.
Yeah.
And so to come back and be in this situation was hugely, it was the single most terrifying thing of my life. And it just led to so much mess with my husband and my family, all of these awful conversations that you have to go. That being said, that wasn't enough to bring me into recovery. I drank for another 8 years after that, and other things happened. But, I think when it comes to assault, there's a really important lesson that I learned, which was I had to accept that, first of all, it wasn't my fault.
Absolutely. But
I had to accept the world the way it was and not the way I wanted it to be. And the world is not safe enough for me to be in blackout. It's that simple. It's not safe enough for me to be without my wits. So while it wasn't my fault, going forward in recovery, I do see it very much as my responsibility to keep myself safe. And so for me, that is what sobriety is. It's like, when we lock our doors at night, we do it because somebody might come in and steal all our stuff. Wouldn't it be lovely if we could sleep with our doors open and know that we weren't going to be attacked? But we don't do that. And we don't do that because we know that the world's not safe enough to leave our doors open. And so for me, sobriety is a spiritual, mental, physical locking of my own doors. And this is not to say, by the way, that those kind of things can't happen when you're sober. They absolutely can. But the odds for me were significantly higher when I was using and drinking. So, yeah, I'd love to say that was the thing that brought me into the rooms, but it wasn't. It was, or that brought me into recovery. But, sometimes I'm just a bit of a slow learner.
Well, me too. Yeah, I think there's a stereotype, isn't there, that there's this one moment that you kind of a light bulb moment that brings you into recovery. But it's, I think, lots of moments that kind of accumulate, and then you can't ignore the pain anymore. And
funnily enough, the thing that brought me into recovery was a relatively high rock bottom. It was just as we were coming. It was like 21. We were coming out of the pandemic, and my husband, who's a touring musician, obviously wasn't working because nobody was touring.
Yeah.
So I was the only one earning money. My mum and dad were both in need of care. My dad had just had a knee or a hip operation. I can't remember. My mum has Parkinson's.
Right.
And I've obviously got 2 small kids. So I was like up and down the road to Devon and London, and I was trying to be the only breadwinner and looking after my parents and my kids and myself. And I just remember waking up on my parents' sofa at 4 a.m. in the morning with this debilitating panic attack, like the kind of panic attack where I thought I was dying, like I would have called 999.
Sure.
And I just knew that it was the alcohol.
Right.
And I wasn't drinking in the mornings. I wasn't, but I knew that my drinking was harming me significantly. And I thought, I sort of thought, I just can't do life like this anymore.
Yeah.
And I went home and said to my husband, that's it, I'm done. I'm going into recovery. I'm going to figure it out.
Wow.
So yeah, a couple of rock bottoms there.
I mean, hugely brave and just so generous of you to share and be so vulnerable with that, because I think it's going to help a lot of people. I mean, I think particularly with the title of your book, and I read your book as well. Well, listen to it, the audio
book
version, which was amazing, by the way.
Thank
Everyone
you.
go and read Kat's books. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Go to the show notes now.
It's
that. There. Go there. I'd like to kind of frame it around this idea of mental load and burnout and stress. And, I guess with hindsight, you can look back and go, yeah, I was self-medicating with alcohol to survive that. You mentioned the word survival a couple of times in your first rock bottom. And I think for me, alcohol at the beginning wasn't about blowing my life up. It was about managing. It was about coping, self-medicating, soothing. rather than sort of go into your childhood, which I think isn't always the best approach, I'd rather ask you about your relationship with alcohol in terms of the mental load and how it helped at the beginning and maybe how it changed.
Yeah, I think that it was definitely, when the responsibilities piled up, when we bought a house, we'd lived together for ages, but, we were single and whatever. It was easy, essentially. We're playing house. Then we bought a house, we got married, we had children. And those responsibilities racking up meant that I suddenly felt an enormous amount of pressure to and I'd felt this my whole life, to succeed and to be the best at being a wife and being a mother and being a writer and all the rest of it. And it was motherhood that really pushed me over the edge. I think that was the thing that completely unmoored me from what maybe could have been described as sort of partying quite hard to using it in a very negative, dependent way. But I talk about this so much because I just don't think people talk about it enough. For me, I thought I'd done the birth plan that was 4 pages, double-sided, color-coded and laminated.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what the midwife said when I handed it to them. I'm embarrassed. So if you are a midwife of mine, please know that I have learned from that. And I think just like everything else, I thought that if I prepare and work hard, I can control the outcome and be really successful at this. And of course, if anybody who's given birth or had a baby knows that is the funniest thing you could even begin to imagine. You can't control anything. And I was very much a control. For me, if I wasn't successful, if I didn't control everything, I wasn't somehow likable or lovable. And so I just approached motherhood in the same way. And of course, it was a disaster. I wasn't good at it because I just tried to overdo everything and overthink everything. And
right.
In the end, I ended up with really debilitating postnatal depression. My husband was home for the first month, but then was away for 7 months. He sort of came back every 3 or 4 weeks, but he was generally away. And I remember feeling incredibly isolated. My family all lived hundreds of miles away. And I would sit in sort of dusty church halls singing The Wheels on the Bus with a soggy custard cream, thinking, this is awful. And I'd be looking for the mums that I thought would have a Prosecco play date.
Right.
There was quite a few. And I just wasn't enjoying it. And I think nobody had given me permission to be anything other than a perfect mother. And I think as I sort of started to write about it, which is where a lot of this whole influencing, content creating, writing stuff starts, people related so hard. I remember I wrote about it the first time and there wasn't anything. It was like you posted it on Facebook. That was where we did our blogging. And overnight, I think it had 3,000 shares and 12,000 reads. Or so. It was huge. And I just thought, we need to talk more about this.
Yeah.
Because it really undermined any sense of self-worth I had, any sense of confidence. Because to say that, to make a mistake as a human, whatever, that's fine, you're not. But to be a woman and feel like you are not a good mother instinctively is so difficult to come to terms with. And of course, nobody ever said to me, you just need to do your best. You don't need to be keeping a super clean house and baking a cake and all of this nonsense and looking great. You just need to get through the day.
And I think as well, you said something in your book that I thought was quite brave. The it's really hard to say.
It is hard to say.
Fetishization.
Yeah.
Let me try that again. Fetishization.
Yeah.
That is hard. That should be a tongue twister in drama school.
Fetishization. Yeah, it's not easy.
The fetishization.
Maybe it's not even a word. I don't know.
No. Well, if you've made it up, it's brilliant. Yeah, the fetishization, you guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
Of motherhood.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you had this sort of picture perfect view of what you were about to go into, and then the reality was.
Yeah, I think women have been, at the risk of bashing, of bashing the patriarchy, which is a much more nuanced subject than this. But I think women have been dealt, especially our generation, quite a rough deal in terms of expectations. I think that we were sort of going, all right, you can have it all. but now you have to do it all. And I don't think we ever really wanted to do it all. We just wanted the choice.
Right.
But I think somehow, no matter what we do outside of the home, our value as women and mothers comes from our ability to be successful as mental load bearers. You know, there is this, you know, if you see a woman who's like, oh my God, I don't do any of the laundry, or I don't do any of the scheduling or anything like that, it's quite unusual.
Yeah.
You know, whereas I felt for a long time that I had to be good. That was where my value came from.
Okay.
And it was exhausting because I couldn't do it all.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of the time I was on my own as a parent as well, you know, and I was working and I had a baby and postnatal depression. I mean, it's no wonder I ended up looking for some sort of way to self-medicate. But I think as well, the other part of it is I'd inherited from my parent, from my mum specifically, a very unhelpful way of existing in a relationship. And I think this is quite common with people who have parents, my parents, like sort of boomer parents, if you like. My mum was very fluent in like door slamming, tutting, I'm fining, all of that. And she always, and we all felt it, she always sort of had this sort of palpable resentment.
Okay.
Completely valid, by the way, like completely valid. She'd been, you know, my dad was great, but he was very absent and, you know, never cooked a meal, never washed anything up. Mum did everything.
Right.
And of course, I was too young to understand that. But what I saw was that this was how a relationship worked. And so when it came to my relationship, there was this kind of toxicity in it where I kind of martyred myself, blamed him for everything, but didn't have the capability to figure out what I was really feeling. I just thought I was just angry and hard done by.
Yeah.
And of course, you drink on that. And then, you know, they call drink a truth serum. For me, it's complete opposite.
Yeah.
Alcohol just made it really easy for me to lie to myself.
Yeah.
Came up with all these like false narratives about how I was perfect and he was rubbish. And, you know, the reality was I just was deeply unhappy with who I'd become, where I'd found myself and where we'd become as a couple. And drinking was what I'd always done. And so that was what I did.
And you had a real realization moment in the book, which I thought was amazing. And I'm sure it's very clear to you now that it actually wasn't about these micro moments of why won't he do the laundry or whatever it is. It's like you just wanted him to know that he was thinking about you and that he cared about you. And it would happen tomorrow as well and the day after that.
And it took us so much therapy to get there.
Yeah.
Like it took so much therapy for me to realize that he had his own sort of mental load as well. Like, you know, at the time I wasn't really able to work when we had a brand new baby, and he was a touring musician who's worried about money anyway. And the pressure on him to keep a roof over our heads, but also the guilt he felt for knowing that the only way you could earn money was to be away. That was really difficult for him. Like, it didn't even occur to me that he was struggling with that. I just thought he was staying in 5-star hotels and having a great time.
Right.
Which he probably was a little bit. But he was also very much concerned about us at home and how he was going to keep a roof over our heads. And I just we couldn't figure out, you know, I knew I was angry every time I saw a plate left on the counter above the dishwasher, but not in it. Because the message I saw then was, she'll fucking do it. And that sort of really erodes away at any goodwill you might have. You know, if you feel constantly like you're being taken for granted or you're not being seen, the reality was, you know, those feelings were valid, but also I wasn't communicating. I was sort of doing it all and then being irritated at him for not knowing that I'd done it all. But I was, you know, it was just a really messy situation where the reality was I was so focused on his side of the street and what he was and wasn't doing that it didn't occur to me to look at my side of the street and how I was contributing, because it was all about fault. My fear was I will be at fault. I am wrong.
Yeah.
I've made a mistake and therefore I will be rejected or I'm not loved or I'm unlovable.
All right.
And so it was out of fear that it always had to be somebody else's fault. I'd throw anybody under the bus.
Right.
You know, like if I got an email saying, oh, who, I don't know, forgot to send this, I'd do whatever I could to make it not my fault.
Got you.
Not because I wasn't horrible person, but because the fear of being caught as
Yeah.
being anything less than perfect
I
was
can
terrifying.
totally relate to that. The kind of perfectionism for me, low self-esteem is a
Yeah.
horrible, crippling paradox, which isn't great.
Yeah.
You've been so incredibly generous with the multi-layered reasons of what that load looks like, not only just from your point of view, but the family point of view and the relationship point of view. So thank you for that. It was
That's
really,
okay.
there's a lot of detail there. I mean, now I'm going to massively oversimplify all of that beautiful nuance you've just given me, but was your main coping strategy throughout all of that just booze? I mean, did you have anything else in the locker at its worst, or was it?
I think it was very much control. I think it was control,
Okay.
definitely. But yeah, I think it was very much booze, because there was somehow some sort of division where I could look at the me now, which was this sort of unhappy, resentful, trapped, woman who spends her whole life putting everybody else first and blah, blah, blah. And then the old version of me that was like really fun and partying and doing all of this. So for me, it was that kind of partying that I sort of identified the old self with.
Yeah.
And so as soon as Jimmy came home, I'd be out.
Right.
I'd be like, I'm out. And
Yeah.
I'd be like, I'll be back at midnight. I was never back at midnight, ever.
Sure.
And I'd come home at 6 o'clock in the morning, gurning, and he'd be like, have you been on coke? I was like, no. Anybody with eyes can see that I've been taking a load of drugs.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, well, you're supposed to look after the kids in an hour. I'd be like, oh, fine, I'll be fine. It was just...
Just have another line, you'd be wide awake.
Yeah, why not? Just plow on through. And I just... So, yeah, for me, it really was drinking. It just represented me being out and having fun and doing that. Just felt like I was sort of holding on to that old me. But it went beyond that to a point where I'd wake up in the morning, and I say I never drank in the morning. I have a friend who's like, well, were you still drinking at 7 a.m. after doing a load of coke? And I was like, yeah. She goes, that counts as drinking in the morning.
Yeah.
And I was like, I never went to sleep and then woke up. And drank.
Right, okay.
But essentially, I didn't wake up and have a drink. Didn't put vodka on my cornflakes. I didn't hide booze around the house. I never lost my license. I didn't lose my kids. I didn't lose a job. I wasn't arrested. Didn't end up in hospital. All of those things back in the day would have had me thinking, I'm not an alcoholic.
Mm-mm.
But the reality is that I was drinking in a way that very much binge drinking, but I was doing it because I was really unhappy and I wanted to change the way I was feeling.
Mm-mm.
And I'd also, and I think so many of us do this, I'd normalized so much of the consequences. Like the serious consequences, like the rock bottoms that I've talked about and been open about. It's quite easy to see that they're not normal.
Yeah.
But the other consequences that can be laughed off as sort of japes and jokes, like, oh, the cat fell asleep on the tube again and woke up in Stanmore and she didn't have a phone, and all,
definitely done something similar to that.
all the rest of it.
Yeah.
At the time, it's like, oh yeah, I did that again. We laugh, have a good time. But I've got 2 girls now, and if one of them did that,
yeah,
I'd be like, that's even falling asleep in a taxi. That's really unsafe.
Yeah.
And yet we don't think twice about it.
No.
And so I think that as much as I spent a lot of time trying to tell myself that I wasn't an alcoholic, the reality is the amount of time and energy I put into knowing when my next drink was, how long I could drink for, when I had to be back, all of that mental gymnastics you do.
Yeah. I don't think that's spoken about enough, actually. The time not drinking, obsessing about when you can next to it. That's part of it as
the
well.
Noise.
So you might be dry, you might not be drinking, but you're
Totally.
constantly obsessing, thinking, planning.
Yeah.
You said something as well in the book, or it might have been on a podcast, I'm not sure, where it seemed to me that the realization came, you said it so simply, but it was so powerful that when I had one, I just didn't know what was going to happen next.
Yeah.
So I might have
Once I started, I never knew where I was going to end up, what was going to happen, or who I was going to be with.
Yeah.
And it was that simple. It was like Russian roulette. 9 times out of 10, it was fine. Got away with it.
Yeah.
Great stories to tell. Every now and again, it wasn't fine.
Right.
And it became, the odds started to change, change a little bit.
So, yeah. Rather than being 1 in 10, it started becoming 2 in 10.
Exactly.
And is that kind of how it played out until basically you had enough evidence? You'd done enough research to kind of go, yeah, every time I pick this drink up, it's going to end up in disaster.
Do you know,
likely.
I don't think, it's weird because I don't think it was that. I wasn't, you know, it's on a spectrum, right? I can go into any kind of recovery meeting or whatever and I can go, well, I'm not that bad, or, you know,
Sure.
and maybe I never would get that bad. I don't know. I'm not going to test the theory. So there wasn't a moment where I went, this has to stop. Like, it wasn't that. It was more just a sudden, like I say, my actual, you know, my last drink, that rock bottom was relatively high. It was just it was more of a, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to make life this hard anymore.
It seems to me as well, survival, perfectionism, control, these are sort of themes that have run through up until this point.
Yeah.
Almost through the lens of in a negative way, but then actually in recovery, you're able to sort of, obviously perfectionism never really exists, but you can be the best version of yourself. You can be in control of yourself.
Yeah.
And you're safer.
Oh, 100%. And I have real compassion for myself in a way that, you know, I didn't before, because I've accepted those really shitty sides of me.
Yeah.
You know, I can be jealous and envious of people. I can be manipulative. I can be dishonest. You know, all of those things. If I don't keep an eye on those things.
Yeah, same.
That's me. And rather than fight them, accepting them and going, okay.
Yeah.
These are just things I have to manage. You know, they're not unique to me. Loads of people have them. At least I know about them. It's like, we're all crazy, but at least I know I'm crazy. You know, it's that kind of awareness. And I do think that self-awareness, awareness of something, you're halfway there, if not most of the way there. Because once you are aware, you can't help but recognize it every time.
Yeah.
And I think it's like when they talk about people who are in recovery and relapse and they go, it's so much worse when you relapse. And I don't know, thank God, touch wood, because I haven't relapsed. But, you know, they say it's so much worse because you've got some recovery in you.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's the awareness. It's like there's an awareness that there is a solution, that you can be sober.
And you don't enjoy relapse because you've got all this recovery knowledge.
Nobody's having a good time on a relapse, I imagine.
Nothing, you know, you think you're going to have even a good hour and you don't.
Yeah.
It's like trying to catch a butterfly as a kid, you know, it's in your hand.
Was relapse part of your story?
Unfortunately, many times.
Was it?
Yeah, 2012, right through to 2015, lots of relapses.
What was it
Terrible.
that, I mean, I know you're supposed to be asking questions, but like, what was it that was the bit where you went, okay, enough, that last time?
It was just kind of like, I'm either going to live or die. And I kind of was more interested in dying, if I'm honest with you. Yeah. But then I thought, if I'm dead, I can't have a drink. And then I realized, wow, this really is like, if there is an end of the road before death, I've probably hit it.
It's the insanity, isn't it?
Yeah, which actually goes to prove the neuroscience, for me anyway, that it is always about survival, I think. Drinking and using drugs, self-medicating, survival. Because even at the end, it saved my ass. When I was contemplating, you know, dying, it was like, yeah, but you can't have a drink if you're dead. And then it stopped me.
Yeah, I really agree and I relate. And for me, I've always, I mean, I'll die on this hill that I think fear is at the root of all addictions.
Right, sure.
For me, because the fear of somehow, somewhere along the line, people who end up in addiction have this fear that somehow we're not good enough or right or acceptable, or that there's something wrong with, and it is this fear. And I remember feeling that fear as a kid. I had no idea what it was.
Yeah, same.
But always feeling like a bit othered, a bit outside, like I had to perform to be perceived as normal. Like it felt like an effort.
Yeah.
And that's something that definitely as a teenager, drinking really helped with, you know, because that
Do you think that's
made it easier.
At the time, your undiagnosed ADHD?
Oh yeah, hugely.
Right.
Huge.
So we think it's a lot higher than this, but the stats at the moment is 1 in 4 creatives have ADHD, 1 in 4 with addiction or in recovery have ADHD.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's higher.
I think, I suspect
now,
it's higher.
I mostly hang around with creatives in and out of recovery. So probably, 50% of the people I know have ADHD.
Yeah.
I probably have it myself. I'm in the process of looking at getting a diagnosis. But
I think that really, because I do remember, if you said to me what's my most traumatic memory, or certainly one of the most traumatic memories as a kid, it was when I was in primary school, and I remember it was a Friday morning, and I had forgotten my maths homework again. I was supposed to bring it in on Monday. I didn't bring it in on Tuesday. And it was like It was just this block. I just could not get it. And every time I sat down in registration, I would instantly remember that I hadn't got my maths homework again. And on Friday, the head teacher came, and I remember he pulled me out the classroom, and he went up and down the corridor, and he opened all the doors to all the other classrooms. And then he proceeded to just give me the hairdryer treatment. Like, I was useless. What was wrong with me? Why couldn't I just do this one thing? All of this.
And that's such an old school way, isn't it?
Such an old school
shaming
way.
one person from the whole class.
Absolute shame. And then, and you know, and I remember another occasion they used to do this thing at the end of term where they would hand out all the lost property, put it all on the stage and hand it out. And, you know, and I remember the head teacher going, Knowles Fitton's my maiden name. It's like, Catherine Knowles Fitton. So I'd go up and I'd go to the stage and collect my hat and sit down. And then she'd pick up the next one, go, Catherine Knowles. And she knew that there were 15 items of mine there, and she made me get up 15 times. Like, she waited until I sat down to do that. And I think that really impacted my self-worth and my belief in myself that I was capable. And of course, now it was ADHD. Like, I know it's ADHD.
And it was so misdiagnosed or undiagnosed in girls and women compared to boys, right? Because they present differently, is my understanding.
Yeah, and I wasn't naughty.
Yeah.
I was academic, but I was quite away with the fairies. I was quite chatty. You know, looking back on it, it's so obvious. But we didn't know what we know. We didn't know then what we know now. Like, it wasn't just a vindictive, you know, decision to ignore girls. We just didn't know.
Are you a bit angry about that looking back? Is there a sense of why didn't someone pick this up? Like, there
was. I think certainly when you get diagnosed, there was definitely first of all, just this overwhelming relief. Like, oh, thank God. Right. You know, like, this explains everything.
Yeah.
And then there was an anger that came from remembering primary school and also university. Funnily enough, in secondary school, I was all right. I went to boarding school, very controlled environment, very small, very managed. You know, it was hard for me to mess up.
I was a bit better as well in secondary school because I had drama.
Yeah.
And I could hyper-focus on that. And I was flunking all the other grades, but drama and English literature, I could really hyper-focus on.
Yeah, and then university came and I was just so unable to self-manage. I just couldn't do it. And I was the kid that didn't know that we were all handing in an essay because it had been in some course guide that I just assumed they'd tell me. You know, it was all of that. And I remember one point, I think my second year, I got caught plagiarizing because I was panicking about an essay that I'd forgotten about. And I was like, you know, all of these things.
Very creative, though, to plagiarize.
I don't know, is it? Obviously, I wasn't creative enough because he picked it out straight away.
Right, yeah, sure.
But I remember that being a really shameful moment as well, because it's not me to cheat. You know, I was always in sports, and that idea that I'd been caught cheating was devastating. I couldn't understand what it was in me that made me do what I saw as bad things. And I think somewhere I just assumed I was a bit bad and therefore had to pretend to be good.
Right. Okay.
So there was definitely a lot of anger about that once I'd been diagnosed, because I just thought if I'd have known, that whole experience would have been really different. But then, you know, I also wouldn't be here. You know, all sorts of things could have happened. I do think that everything happens for a reason, and everything's a lesson.
Yeah.
And I think that there was sort of a
School of rock bottom right there.
Oh, look at that.
Come on.
It's like it's like I planned it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things. You know, I don't know why I'm an addict. I don't know. I think it's a mixture of genes and learned behavior and trauma and everything. But certainly that undiagnosed ADHD and the effects of that really sort of kneecapped me emotionally and spiritually, for sure.
Yeah.
In a way that I didn't even really realise. You know, it's only you look back and you go, yeah, no wonder.
Yeah.
I was so screwed.
Well, also on top of that, I mean, you know, we talk about the mental load, and, you know, everyone can experience it with or without ADHD, but I guess it gives it a microphone, right? It amps everything up. And looking at ADHD as well, you've obviously got this kind of lack of dopamine, obviously drugs and alcohol spikes that. A lot of people have difficulty, I think, with impulsivity, and obviously, you know,
tick.
Let's not think about the long-term consequences. Let's just see what we're going to get right now.
Yeah, well, I think definitely there is some sort of brain chemistry involved, for sure. But But also for me, a lot of it was the noise, like it was sort of quietening down the noise.
Yeah.
Because it is noisy in your head when you've got ADHD.
Absolutely.
And it is frustrating when you know you've got it, but you know your brain's doing you dirty a little bit sometimes, and it is frustrating.
Yeah.
And so drinking just sort of it just switched it off a bit.
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, certainly managing the mental load with undiagnosed ADHD was just led me to burnout because I just overmasked. I was like, the only way I can manage this mental load is if I really organize and the shit out of my entire life.
Yeah.
And the effort that it takes me to be as scheduled and organized as it takes a normal person is enormous. And it is exhausting. And so I would go through these periods of just like complete burnout.
Yeah, there's the dopamine thing, the lack of dopamine.
Yeah.
And drugs and alcohol give you dopamine. The emotional dysregulation.
Yes.
So more prone to anxiety, anger, depression, and obviously substances seem to soothe that. The impulsivity, not thinking long-term, much more likely to take risks.
Yeah.
And the last one is if it's undiagnosed as a child, then it's much more likely to become like a coping strategy.
Yeah.
And so I can look at all those things and go, that could be the thread. Because I've always said it was anxiety for me, but maybe that was the reason why.
Yeah.
And I always say that my first addiction was to thinking. I've always
that's
said
interesting.
that. Overthinking.
Yeah.
And when I discovered alcohol like you, it just seemed to just quieten everything down. It was like such a relief.
My first addiction was food, and I didn't realise this until I'd got sober and found myself in the midst of a food addiction. But I remember as a kid I had this obsession with Kit Kat. I mean, I still do. Kit Kats
I love the chunky ones.
hands down the best.
Do you like the chunky ones?
I like any kind of Kit
You
Kat.
ever put it in the freezer?
No, I'm not allowed to eat them anymore.
Oh, sorry.
But
Triggering
I can
my guests.
imagine.
They're
I can
disgusting.
imagine well, I remember waking up early. My mum knew I loved Kit Kats, so she always had 2 packets of the 2-finger Kit Kats. So there was 16 2-finger Kit Kats, 32 sticks of Kit Kat. And I remember setting my alarm early on purpose so I could wake up early. This is when I'm like in primary school. Go down, eat all the Kit Kats, shove all the wrappers down the sofa.
Yeah.
And then when my mum found them, she'd be like, "Did you eat these?" And I'd say no, which was so stupid because I was an only child. So nobody else ate them. So I was already like binging, hiding and lying. And that was always like the food thing for me and the sugar thing for me as a kid was always, fortunately, I was an athlete from the minute I swam before I could walk. So
it's amazing.
It didn't ever look like I was, but I gave up booze. I thought, this is brilliant. I'm going to lose a bit of weight. Lost nothing, put on 3 stone.
Right.
And that food thing I know it. I eat for my brain. Like I want that hit. It's exactly the same hit that I got when I had that first sip of Malbec or cold Sauvignon Blanc. It was the same thing. And the noise around food is exactly the same as the noise around alcohol. Like I'd say, I'm not going to drink today. Okay, well, I'm drinking. Well, I'm not going to finish the bottle. Well, now I've finished the bottle. Well, I might as well have a gin. And then I'd wake up in the morning and be like, you're a horrible human being. And it was the same with food. I'm going to eat well today. Why am I having 5 pieces of toast?
Yeah.
Or I'll have a salad for lunch. Oh, now I've had a packet of Hobnobs. I need to fall asleep in some sort of hyperglycemic coma. And then I'd wake up just with this real feeling of shame and pain and self-hatred and discomfort that felt exactly the same as waking up after a binge on booze.
I guess that's the ongoing work, isn't it? Where, if you've self-medicated in the past and you're now in recovery from, drugs and alcohol, you're going to look to your phone or
totally.
Food
but I want to
or
be
work.
one of these people that gets addicted to running and salad.
God.
Why can't I be one of those people?
I know. Do you know why? I think because it's harder work. You get the hit of dopamine, but it takes a lot of effort, and I don't like that. I like getting dopamine very, very cheaply.
I like an easier way.
Yeah, like even a cold shower. I know is supposed to be great, but to me, it's just too painful.
Yeah, I get really annoyed with that. I just think, why can't you would go through this stuff and Wim Hof's like, oh, your ice bath is what's good for you. Why can't a nice warm bubble bath be good for you?
I know. Do you know how it works on a neurological level? It's really
Because
interesting.
it's supposed to be really bad for women.
Oh, interesting.
Apparently, ice bathing or cold, I don't know if it's cold swimming is as bad, but certainly the intense sort of ice bath is supposed to be
It's
really
not good
bad
for
for
the
women,
body.
especially my age, perimenopausal.
Interesting.
Not good, apparently.
How it works in the brain is you're creating a dopamine deficit by having a cold shower or a cold bath. So in other words, the brain experiences pain. It downgrades the amount of dopamine in the brain. And then because of that, you get a spike when you come out. So you're kind of doing it in reverse. You're getting less dopamine, and then the brain will spike it higher because of that, which I find quite interesting.
Maybe I'll try it.
So it doesn't give you the dopamine in the moment. It's the relief afterwards that gives
but you don't
hit.
have to be in a cold shower for as long as you'd have to run. So there's
so
that.
maybe it's a quicker fix.
Maybe it's a quicker fix.
You know, that's why I used to like
and better than
tequila, because it'd be like
16. Yeah, I used to do flaming sambuca in my mouth was always my party trick.
Really? It's the only drink that triggers me. I'll be honest with you. I can be around alcohol. It doesn't bother me. I can go into clubs, bars.
Yeah, me too.
But if people are doing lots of shots, I have to walk out.
See, away. I was always a wine girl.
Right.
And I think that, I mean, shots I would do, but certainly like anything I had to do, anything that required more than just taking the lid off.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be bothered to make a gin and tonic. I think that was the ADHD. Do you know what I mean? I think it was like, I have to get the gin and the tonic and some ice and do all of that. I can't be bothered. I might as well just open a bottle of wine.
Yeah, I don't want to wait for the dopamine too long.
No, I don't want to work too hard for it. Just give me the wine.
This episode is sponsored by Gavin Sisters, the passionate teetotal founders of the Detox Balm Retreat and the creators of Funky Coffee. If you love the taste of coffee but want to ditch the crash, Funky Coffee is your new go-to. Made from triple certified organic Arabica coffee and infused with powerful mushrooms, it gives you all the energy and none of the jitters. Plus, it's amazing for your gut, skin, and athletic performance. And if you're looking to recharge your body and mind, you've got to check out the Detox Barn. This award-winning retreat located in both the UK and the Algarve is a plant-based, alcohol-free sanctuary where you'll learn how to be healthier, happier, and more balanced. Whether it's for a weekend away or a full restorative retreat, just visit gavinsisters.co.uk and use the code School of Rock Bottom for 10% off your next retreat or a bag of their amazing Funky Coffee. That's School of Rock Bottom for a 10% discount for a healthier, happier you. Go check them out. This is where recovery gets interesting and I think is quite tricky because like for me, I got into recovery and, you know, tools like gratitude and things like that. They don't, for me, they never work straight away. It's not like I did a gratitude list or journaled and like suddenly I felt better.
Yeah.
You know, like imagine going to the dealer and they're like, yeah, take these drugs in 3 months, you're going to feel great. Go away. So it's quite interesting. So now talking about your recovery, I wonder if we could start here and looking at some tools that you use. I mean, you've used the word alcoholic a couple of times in a world where alcohol use disorder is much more trendy. Just wondered why for you is it important to use that word?
Because that's what I am. Like I think I think it's a real problem that there is still so much stigma attached to that word. You know, when you think of like, if we don't use that word, then, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous isn't available to people because if people aren't willing to go, I'm an alcoholic, then they don't assume that Alcoholics Anonymous is for them. Now, I'm not saying that's the only way to get sober. It absolutely isn't.
Sure.
But also, I think that we can PR everything to death. The reality is, whatever you call it, we've got a problem and we can't fix it, you know. And I think that for the sake of simplicity and to avoid getting stuck in the weeds of like, what's grey area drinking, what's problem drinking, what's this, what's that, I am an alcoholic. And there is no definition of what that is. It's not like I had to reach a certain amount of bottles of wine a day before I could do it. I decided that I was an alcoholic. And that for me was necessary because if I go, I'm a grey area drinker, or there's part of my brain that will go, oh, you're probably not that bad. And the reality is, maybe I could moderate now. I don't know. Maybe I could. I don't want to go back to having to think about alcohol in the same way that I did. And I would. I'd have to be constantly thinking about it. And B, alcohol, now that I've been sober, I know that alcohol did nothing, gave me nothing. Like the best I could hope for, or anybody can hope for as a drinker, is that you level out at zero. Yeah. It's never going to improve your life or your health. Yeah. And chances are it's going to impact you negatively. Yeah. And so there's no reason why I would even try to moderate, because now for me, it's like I just order something different at the bar. And of course, behind the scenes, I do all the work.
Yeah.
But as far as everybody knows, I just order something different at the bar.
And would you say that in a social situation if someone said to you,
it's my favourite thing to do.
Yeah. You like seeing their reaction?
Well, yeah. But also, I can't, like, I have to be honest in everything. And so when somebody says, why aren't you drinking? There isn't anything I can say other than, oh, I'm an alcoholic, so I don't drink.
Yeah.
Because especially in our society, if I go, oh, you know, I just don't drink. They're like, oh, why? Why don't you drink? And I just can't be bothered to have that conversation.
Good for you.
Like, I'm an alcoholic.
I always say to people that I work with in recovery and also for myself, I think the language that we use has to, number one, safeguard a recovery. Like, does it safeguard me? And that will look different to everybody else. Totally. It very much safeguards you. And does it empower me in some way? And I think the answer is yes to those two things, and it's the right word for you.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
And I think that if me using that word, because I don't look like an alcoholic in terms of, people who aren't in recovery, don't have a lot of interaction with addicts and alcoholics, will just assume that I don't look like an alcoholic, when obviously in reality, we walk amongst people. Do you know what I mean? Everybody.
Elton John's an alcoholic. I'm not outing him. He celebrates, but he just hasn't had a drink in 30
Anthony
years.
Hopkins, the same.
Hopkins,
we are. It's not all. I think I went into recovery expecting it to be full of old men who slept on park benches with ruddy faces and string holding up their trousers. You know, when I actually went in and there was like a 19-year-old girl and she'd got 3 years and, a grandma and people who looked just like me, it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
But the stigma of it, I think, holds quite a lot of people back from getting the help that they need, or at least admitting it.
Well, this is where it gets interesting, because a lot of people that advocate, and I can understand why they do it, and it comes from a good place, replacing the word with alcohol use disorder, for example, their argument is by changing it to that, you're reducing stigma. But my worry is by not saying the word, it just creates more stigma for that word.
Totally. And I think at the end of the day, there are some words and there are some diagnoses that we don't like.
Yeah.
That aren't comfortable.
Yeah.
That's okay. We don't need to make everybody feel, I feel like we're sort of skirting around the issue. It doesn't really matter what we call it, but we need to be honest about what it is. Alcohol use disorder, doesn't matter what, you're still the same.
Still the same.
Still the same.
Yeah.
I just think part of my acceptance and part of my recovery is supported. So the foundation of it is that I am an alcoholic.
Yeah, same as me.
If there was any wriggle room or any PR on that, I know my brain, I'd figure out a way to get around it.
100%. Of course.
I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
End of. And I am very grateful, because honestly, my life in recovery is, I know myself and I am at peace with myself and I'm kinder to myself and to everybody else around me in a way that I wouldn't have learned how to do if I was a normal drinker and just sort of lived my life.
Absolutely.
And so I remember somebody said to me the other day, if you could cure your alcoholism, if you could go back in time and you never had it, would you? And I was like, absolutely not. I was fortunate that my experience wasn't as devastating as some people's are, but I cannot ever imagine giving up what I've learned in sobriety, and I wouldn't have got it anywhere else.
I think one thing, working in rehabs is a real blessing for me as well, because I'm always getting that feedback that if you go back out, I mean, obviously other people might get it in meetings and there's lots of other, smart meetings or whatever. I'm always getting that feedback that I've gone back out and it was shit.
Yeah.
No one comes back from a relapse. Oh, it was great. I've never thrown up so much.
And nobody ever gets sober and goes, well, I got sober and my life turned to shit.
Oh, it was terrible.
Yeah, it was the worst thing I ever did. Nobody does that.
Someone I actually knew, I'm going to call him Paul. His name isn't Paul, for obviously to keep him, his anonymity, not that you could guess by a first name anyway. But he went back out. Someone that I actually knew, he was around 3 years, smashing life, amazing. And I knew him just from around the way. And he rocked up in one of the rehabs I was working in, absolutely broken.
Yeah.
I couldn't even recognize him.
Yeah.
And I said, why did you go back out? And he said his life was so amazing in recovery. He just thought he'd react differently to the alcohol.
Yeah. He tested the theory.
And I'm constantly getting this feedback, when the head goes, well, maybe I could just
I mean, I have to, I have to, we've talked about this and I don't talk about it a lot, but I do a 12-step program and I have to step one myself most mornings because it wasn't as bad as I hear.
Yeah.
I can go into meetings and I can hear people talking. I go, well, mine wasn't anywhere like that bad. And then my brain can go, well, maybe you're not really an alcoholic.
Yeah, sure.
But the reality is I am, because, there was a point at which my baby was 6 months old and I was on my own. Jimmy was away. A friend came over. We drank. We didn't have any Coke. So I ended up in blackout. Woke up at 6 a.m. with the baby crying, which was awful because it was 6 a.m. I don't think I'd gone to bed till about 4. And I went to her cot and she wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And, in blackout, I'd obviously gone in, picked her up, maybe even nursed her, God bless her. And she was on the spare bed. She was fine, thank God.
Yeah.
And as much as that was a near miss, I was living my life very much on this knife edge of getting away with it and total fucking disaster.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if that baby had fallen off that bed,
absolutely,
I would have had to race her to the ER or A&E.
Yeah.
I would have been stinking of alcohol. Social services would have come in immediately. I drank and drove.
Mm.
I just didn't get caught.
Yeah.
That's not anything to do with me being a slightly, better alcoholic than anybody else. Just pure luck.
I mean, the only question I personally use to kind of diagnose my own powerlessness is simply one question: can I be sure I can stop at one? And if the answer is I may or may not be able to, I'm powerless. Like, I've never gone on an orange juice bender. You know what I mean?
That powerlessness, I think that there's quite a lot of resistance to that, with some people who they go, I'm not powerless. And I get that. But for me, accepting that powerlessness is
absolutely
the biggest show of strength.
But then there's also hope in step one.
Totally.
We admitted we were powerless, past tense.
And I'm the problem.
Yeah.
The problem's me. That isn't me I mean, I can be I've never met a stick I don't want to beat myself with. But me saying that I'm the problem is not me being self-deprecating. That's me going, how fucking cool is that? Because I can change me.
You can change you, yeah.
I can figure that out. If my husband's a problem or if my job's a problem or whatever, I've got very little control over that.
And I think you can look at both. You can say, well, alcohol itself is a poison, and
Totally.
also it's made my behaviour. I mean, I think powerlessness is about consumption, but also about behaviour and mood, and it's not just about
weird.
It's a whole thing. So I sort of look at my own behaviour, but I can also go, alcohol's the problem, and obviously then remove it.
And also, I think in recovery, I've learned that alcoholism and addiction is not about the alcohol.
Sure.
It's about my brain and how it works, whether that's, genes or trauma, whatever it is. I could, without, if I'd not done the work, I could have given up booze and still been a twat.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It wasn't, it wasn't that I couldn't have just stopped drinking and then become this paragon of virtue. That wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So it was very much about recognizing that no matter what the substance of choice is, I needed to fix something, or at least recognize something deeper inside me. Because I put down booze and I picked up 20 cigarettes straight off.
Yeah,
I was like, if I'm not going to drink today, I'm going to have some cigarettes. And that was it. I was on 20 a day. Yeah. And then it was food, and there is something in me that needs that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I've got it all figured out.
Absolutely.
But it goes back to that idea of that awareness. There is an awareness in me that something is still, unless I'm hypervigilant, is still always ready to pounce on something.
Yeah. And can you dress it up with work? Because I can do that.
I can as well.
I'm trying to fill the void, but it's all fine because I'm just working really hard. But I'm getting the dopamine from an email or whatever.
And so much of my work is on my phone, on social media. So that is...
How do you manage that? That sounds really difficult. I mean, you've got a large social media following. I know that if I have a guest on that has a lot of, or if a TikTok goes viral, I just had one that did 1 million.
Love that.
Which was great. Yeah, I could feel the dopamine coming in, like hundreds of comments and blah, blah, blah. I think I had 6,000 comments in, a couple of, and it was exciting, but it was really exhausting as well. How do you manage all of that? Because you must be getting lots of likes and comments and DMs
and then
stuff.
the times when I don't get the likes and the comments and I'm like, oh, yeah,
right.
I think it does. But I also think that it is my job. The majority of my income unsurprisingly doesn't come from writing and selling books, even if they're hits, because nobody makes any money with books anymore. It comes from Instagram, and I do a lot of brand deals and and all of that stuff. So there is part of me that's like, this is work. And there are times when my girls will go, you know, right in the middle of summer holidays. So it's like, you're always on your phone. And I'm like, well, this is work.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I'm not in an office. You're very lucky that I'm here and we can have a good time. But there are times when I do have to be on my phone. So I think there is part of me that's able to justify it like that.
Makes sense.
Having said that, I put way too much emphasis on the validation I get from the work that the content I put out there.
Yeah.
I have to manage that. I'm very guilty of slipping into that compare and despair.
Yeah.
But then I also think these are problems that most people have with every job.
True.
You know, if you feel like you haven't done a good job or you delivered a presentation, it didn't land that well, you're going to struggle with that. You know, if there's somebody next to you who's getting a promotion and you're not, that's hard. So,
and also, sorry to interject, I suppose it depends how you look at it as well, because you could frame it and say, well, my ADHD and my addiction history amplifies that. But I could counter that and say, because you've got recovery, you've now got the tools in order to manage that. Yeah. So actually, because of, say, ADHD and addiction, for example, they've actually helped you rather than become a hindrance.
100%. And I do think, you know, there is that obsessive nature of mine. There is that creative, chaotic stuff, which I've learned now that I'm aware of it, I can now channel for the power of good. Sure. Left unattended and it's chaos. And there is still, you know, there is still quite a lot of chaos in my life. But I couldn't do what I do. And I think this is true for a lot of creatives without the ADHD energy, without the obsessiveness. And it's just become, you know, I accept that I am always going to have to manage that. Yeah. But the pros now really outweigh the cons of those things, and the certain medication, you know, the medication's right and the treatment's right, and, you know, the meeting numbers are right, whatever it is that keeps me balanced, I have to stay on top of that.
And because of that awareness, it means you won't sleepwalk into disaster, which has happened to friends of mine who don't know anything about mental health therapy or have really got zero self-awareness, and suddenly they're in the mix of a terrible depression.
And going back to these people, you know, your friend that relapses, I know so many people who are 10, 12 years and then go back out again. And that for me isn't a comment on recovery. Yeah. That is a comment on the power of addiction.
Oh, 100%.
You know, and they say, don't they, that like, you know, if you're in a meeting, you're in, you know, your addiction's doing press-ups in the car park. That's always true.
Yeah. I think it's really important, something you said earlier as well. You said that, you know, you weren't sort of the stereotypical drinking every day. And I think that keeps a lot of people in active addiction. Recovery Village, who are based in America, they're kind of a conglomerate of rehabs. They did a big survey. I mean, I take this with a pinch of salt. And they found that just 9.2%, you've got to love that, haven't you? 9.2% of people in recovery actually drink every single day. So therefore, the vast majority of people in recovery would binge hard, stop. Yeah. Then there's a gap and binge again.
And people who have never been anywhere near recovery have no, I've met so many people who are like, hang on a minute, binge drinkers are in recovery.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm like, yeah.
They're the majority, actually.
Yeah, because it's so normal, especially in the UK, it's so normalised.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Going out and getting shit-faced is...
And doing a bag of Coke.
And doing a bag of Coke and all the rest of it. You know, there was an article recently, I can't remember where it was, but like, you know, most middle-aged women in the Cotswolds are doing a load of Coke. I'm like, well, yeah, right, of course they are.
But it's rife.
I bet it is.
Old Kingham.
Oh, tell you what, some guy hanging around Brixton, he needs to get out to,
he needs to go out to the Cotswolds.
Whatever it is, Chipping Norton.
Chipping Norton.
That's where you need to be. But it's.
We've got 1 minute here.
What?
And I just rudely interrupted you. And I wanted to finally ask you a very quick question before lovely Praveen kicks us out of this room. Bit of a weird segue into this. But... Kat Sims, what do you want written on your gravestone?
I love that because I do think that it's either recovery or death for me. So it is I need to get prepared just in case something awful happens. Do you know what I'd have? She did her best.
I love that, yeah.
I think that'd be it because it's just that final undermining of perfection that's been the beast on my back, really. Yeah. Like, do you know what? She did her best and she was all right with that.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's what it'd be.
Kat, you've been an absolute legend. I've loved
Thank you
hanging out
so
with you
much
for the
for
last
having
hour
me.
and the coffee before. And, you know, it's been really good.
We do
great to speak to
TikTok
you more.
seminar after.
Yes,
Figure that out.
Exactly. I'm going to, you know, try and get more knowledge from you. But it's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And guys, please head to the show notes now. I'm sure you're already following Kat. If you're not, go there and follow her Instagram and the podcast. But we didn't even talk about your podcast.
That's all right. Don't worry. We'll do the book and then they'll find the podcast. But
So there's the book. There's her main account. She's got an amazing podcast as well. I'll put all the links there in the show notes. Also, if you're listening to this on Spotify, give us 5 stars, write a review. Apple, apparently the review's very important. I would love that. And if you're watching it on YouTube, hit subscribe, leave us a comment, all of that salesy stuff. And also don't forget 10% off all of Gavin's sister's stuff. That's in the show notes. And as I've always promised, and I've not let you down yet, I will be back in 2 weeks' time for a brand new episode. Until then, look after yourself and thanks for watching or listening.